Welcome to the Garden of Rose. I am your host, Cécile Masson, a writer and generative coach and facilitator. And I'm really happy to welcome Elsie Maio in the Garden of Rose. Welcome, Elsie.
Thank you, Cecile.
Just tell me a little bit more about your background. We've talked so much, but just tell me a little bit more about your background, your experience.
Okay, I want to speak into what your listeners want to hear. So, um, well, like you and like probably many people who are watching this, I'm someone who is alive with the spirit of the joy of life and the sense that um, we humans are capable of creating the world that we want. A world where there is flourishing for all. We know that there is enough to go around, and we are looking and seeking for the best way that we can contribute to bringing that about. We also, I'm using the we for myself and for what I am intuiting brings people to the Garden of Rose. We also are not sure and are exploring and eager to discover the new, because we know that the path to this flourishing world is not quite the path that society has been on, or that our institutions have been on, or that we ourselves as products of this culture have been on. And so we're seekers. And we're people who have the confidence of having accomplished much in our lives. We have a sense of agency. And we also have a sense of the beauty of being with each other, collaborating, and leaning on each other from time to time, and the beauty of flowing together in the give and take. I've come to feel and believe and hold that the underlying dynamic of life is give and take. It is a dynamic equilibrium, a state of dynamic equilibrium, the yin and the yang. I think of it as in a natural system. The cycle of life, there are many words for it. And so I seek, and I presume that people who are attracted to the Garden of Rose also seek how to align with that and surrender to that in a way that works in the world. We're not people who go to the mountain to escape or to pray for others. I mean, I think that there's a very valid, honorable role for people who do go up to the mountain and go and meditate and pray, for the monks of the world, for example.
Absolutely.
And they do energetically affect the collective. And the people who are attracted to the Garden of Rose, I think, as well as to my work, are people who are agents of change or change makers. So my history is being in a very traditional role in business as a change maker for effective business, for success in a capitalist type of way. I started out on Wall Street, and then went to McKinsey and Company, and then entered the world of corporate identity, which gave me the opportunity to influence at the level I wanted to, which was to help literally the CEOs and chairmen, and they were men in the decades when I was doing this kind of work, to envision what they wanted their companies to become, and to help them make that happen quickly. And they did. So another inflection point that you might want me to mention here is having achieved the success that I had aimed for. One morning, I woke up with ashes in my mouth, like my spirit was saying, I'm dying.
Mm.
And maybe others who are listening can relate to the idea of dead goals. Like when you achieve a goal in your life, it's done. And creating a new one is really important to the vitality of the spirit, if not anything else. And then there are times when we have goals that are dead because they become irrelevant. And that's another time, a time that I think of as a threshold where there's a choice. Am I going to pursue, am I willing to start over and go inside and listen to the call of my spirit, of my soul, of my heart, and become a student again of life and not know where it's going to take me. And so that's the point where I work with clients, and I think you do too, from what I've experienced of your work, which is when we are at an inflection point where we know that what we know is not what we want to know or not enough. And that can include, who am I?
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
So I don't know if that's the kind of
Yeah.
background that you were looking for.
Yeah, thanks so much, Elsie. That's really what indeed the question was all about. And you are at the moment in New York. Did you grew up in New York as well, right?
I did. I
Yeah.
was born in Brooklyn.
All right.
Um, and I was born into a family of an Italian American father and an Irish American mother, um, and with a whole lot of love and closeness in my family. I'm one of four siblings. I'm the eldest. I have 7 nieces and nephews, um, most of whom are now having their own children. So I am a grand auntie or great auntie. I'm not sure which one I am, but I'm very happy to be. So there are lots of babies in my family now, and
Uh,
yeah, it's pretty wonderful.
the beautiful bridge, as you are a bridge builder anyway, you are the bridge yourself. To the next questions I wanted to ask you about is that being of a certain age, a great aunt, as you say, and an aunt, what is your relationship with the character of Rose that has obviously some kind of relevance in what we are sharing here as well in the Garden of Rose?
Yes, well, I picked up the book the minute you said that because I feel some kind of identification with Rose. Let me say the spirit of Rose as the voice of Rose in this book. Look at how these colors match what you're wearing.
Thank you.
um, the spirit of Rose in this book is the spirit of a human being. She happens to be an elder reflecting on her life. And she could be anyone who I referred to earlier, who is at that threshold in life where you're taking a pause
Mm.
and you're reflecting on your life where it's been and where you want it to go. So I relate to that state of being on a threshold. I am one of those people who is kind of always or very usually reflecting on, okay, is this where I want to be? Where am I going? How does this fit in with, how does it feel in my body? So I relate to Rose in that way. And I think that anyone of any age, including the people that I mentor now, the change makers that I mentor, who are, I'll call them next gen, just for the sake of, they're the next gen of leaders of our world. So I'll call them next gen if you'll allow me to do that, just for convenience. Next gen are Rose too. The next gen that I work with, that you work with, are people who are self-reflective and who recognize that this time on earth is limited and that we have such a great opportunity, having agency, to create a future for ourselves and others around us. So I relate to Rose that way, as a being that is self-reflective. And what I love about her is that she loves herself. Rose, and she loves the people in her life, even the ones that she's disagreed with, she has respect for. And she speaks with a magnanimity that includes all of it as fruitful. So I relate to Rose, and I think anyone who aspires to look back on their life and think, I did okay. I see where I did make mistakes, and they're already forgiving themselves. Anyway, so that's one way that I relate to Rose. The other way is in her worldview. And this relates to my theory of change, which is, and it's so appropriate that you call this community the Garden of Rose, because the garden is a web of life, is a piece of the web of life, or a representation of the web of life as a web of entangled relationships, period.
Thank
and
you
those
so much.
and those relationships are the natural world. And it's just so wonderful how science is coming around now and caring about looking at the natural world and looking at the web and discovering, the magic of the fact that aspen forests are one organism connected underground. The popularization of the mycelium discoveries, the intelligence of plants, the intelligence of nature. There's even some wonderful, fascinating science in the quantum field, in quantum biology, that is positing and documenting in the work of Michael Levin the intelligence at the nano level and at the cellular level, and the notion of attractors. I won't go into detail, but I will say that I've come to a theory of change which says that reality is a hyper interdependent, entangled living system at every level. And guess what? We humans haven't been operating that way. So, when we look at the failures of society today, the tragedy, the drama of starvation, of suffering, human suffering, just looking at that, because of lack of food or lack of opportunity or because of a lack of self-awareness. Even, in the work that you do illustrates this lack of awareness or a lack of balance among the different intelligences of the body or of the beingness. So I think the game is for us humans is to find a way to flow with the natural give and take of the dynamics of this system. And it's at every level. It's at the level of the biome in the gut. It's at the level of all the different intelligences that you work with. It's at the level of each other. It's at the level of engaging with the natural environment, with the climate, for example, instead of what's happening today, which is this brittle, mechanical systems that we've been working to maximize productivity, that industrial mindset that sees life as a machine and a hierarchy to be dominated. It doesn't work. It's not fit for purpose anymore. So I think we're in the midst of letting go of that identity as masters of the machine and finding this beautiful, beautiful flow. I'm looking out at the ocean right now, and the waves are coming in and going out. And, the tide comes in, it goes out, the moon comes out, the tide comes up. Women menstruate. We're all literally connected, even with the planets.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure I answered your question there either.
You did very well indeed. Thank you so much, because it's really about what your work is all about, right? It's to reconnect to that calling of yours, that spirit and that soul that you, at some point in your life, if I record well, 1999, you really woke up to that calling, and from where you created that soul branding process that now is a beautiful way of helping your clients to actually go into that territory where seeking and not knowing and experimenting is a given. It's a playground, but a very serious one, to really bring forth that voice of the individual leader, but also as a company. How did you start shaping that process? I'm very curious about that.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder if I can remember. Oh, I know. It was just a very natural outgrowth of, when you're helping large organizations, like I'm thinking of a particular client I had. It was a super regional bank in the States. And it was run, two clients. One was IBM corporate, and the other was the super regional bank. I can talk about IBM corporate because that's public and it's honestly so long ago. And the second is the super regional bank. With the super regional bank, the business objective, the reason why they hired the firm that I was with, and I ran the project, was they had failed at making a successful acquisition. So they wanted to get into the retail banking market in a city that was not culturally receptive. And they failed twice. And then they hired us. And then they hired us. And so the solution there was just so obvious to me. And the systems approach that I had innovated, which is, if you are looking to achieve a goal, then you look at the whole ecosystem that's required for you to achieve it. Like, who are the actors that are gatekeepers to you achieving your goal? Notice I said actors, not necessarily forces, not dynamics, but the actors, the humans. And so essentially, we helped literally the CEO recognize that his legal ability to make this acquisition was not going to make it successful. And this is the epitome of that mechanical mindset that I'm talking about. Today, you may think of it as the technical mindset. Someone may think, because I have the technical capacity to force this transition, I'm going to do it and win. Back then, it was because I have the legal capacity to force this acquisition, I'll win. And it didn't work for him twice. So he was at that threshold that I'm talking about. He was open.
Yeah.
Right? He got that what he knew was not what he needed to know, not enough. Yeah. And so that's how we were able to come in and say, well, how about if you look at it as a dynamic system? And part of the dynamics are the human preferences. And as much as you'd rather not deal with them, if you want them to support you and buy what you're selling, you're going to need to pay attention to them. And so that's how reverse engineering, this person came to appreciate that values like mutual respect. So he really had to listen and change the way he was doing things. It wasn't just listen and write an ad or a communications message. He had to meet their expectation, their threshold expectation. And that meant doing things very differently and becoming more human in his policies and practices, not just his branding. And that's the distinction that I hope to make with the word soul branding. It is about being, and that's why it has an ing. It's about a process of centering soul in your business before you brand it.
Exactly. So just now you talked about the values of a company. How would you now define the essential? How can we redefine essential values in the context also of feminine empowerment or feminine leadership? What is the space of female leaders or females in general, or the female energy, because many men have also a lot of positive feminine energy that they want to bring into the field? How can that contribute to redefine value in that threshold we are on all together?
Thanks for that question. I've always had first a couple of dimensions to it. The nomenclature is one dimension. And secondly, the state of being implied by the nomenclature. And I would encourage everybody to make that distinction. And I'll start with the nomenclature. We in America right now, and de facto the world, because of the influence of American culture, are being attacked through the use of nomenclature. And people call it weaponized terminology. And it serves a great function, and it's very effective to weaponize terminology. It's very effective. So I'll just touch on that now. If you want to go into it more deeply later, we can. But the thing about talking in dualities, I find, is increasingly not useful, not productive. Talking in feminine and masculine, talking in dualities in a world that is hungry for polarization, in a world where the hungry ghosts are like looking to grab on opportunities to polarize, even the hungry ghosts in us, and let's face it, we incorporate everything. Every being human means you've got everything in you. You've got the good, the bad, the ugly, the exalted, and it's all a matter of conscious choice. So there's a part of us that has a knee-jerk blaming them, blah, blah. And I think I'm trying to discipline myself away from dualistic language so I'm not feeding those hunger ghosts. That being said, behind the word feminine values, and in my paper in the Journal of Business Ethics in 2003, which was a summary of a conference in the Netherlands at Erasmus University. It was a watershed conference on corporate social responsibility. In that paper, Journal of Business Ethics, 2003, called Managing Brand in the New Stakeholder Environment, and you can find it on my website. I talked about values, and I struggled with what to call them. But let's talk about them as generative values. Values that encourage mutual respect. Values that actually are the first principles of a healthy dynamic equilibrium. So I'm going back to this idea of the complex living system and the dynamics of it. And if you are going to flow with and thrive in a yin and yang that's constantly exchanging value, that's really what's happening. Constantly exchanging value. I mean, even when you think about the matter as we die, we become particles that are exchanging value with each other and the earth and the air, and then that comes to be reformulated, even at that level. So that presumes a collaboration, a symbiosis. And for humans, first principles of that would be collaboration. If we're going to be agents, it's going to be perhaps fairness, justice, equality, respect, inclusion, like recognizing that every little bit here is affecting every little bit of the other. That's inclusion, diversity. But these words have been weaponized. So in terms of feminine, and in this paper, I talk about a little what I'll call pro-social values, i.e., values that are empowering of the collective well-being. Or you can call them human values. Some people call them feminine values. You can call them generative values. All they are first principles of flowing with a give and take kind of environment. You know, it's like the golden rule, and my friend Kim Pullman, through Reboot the Future and through everything that she does, is reminding us it's as simple as the golden rule. Treat others as you would, and the planet as you would want to be treated. It's the simple rule of mutual exchange and value.
So you now spoke about this nomenclature, the way it's been used. And we're talking here, obviously, in the Garden of Rose and about the living web and how, in a concrete world where we are, all of us, how can we shape that value in the sense that we can valorize, for instance, I'm just giving an example because we are in that garden, having conversations like what is more valuable? Is it a tree or a piece of wood? in your house, or is it a living tree? And that's obviously part of some of the ideas that I bring into the book as well. Rose Lets Soul After Life, where how can we redirect that conversation? So in that sense, change the narrative to value each single piece of living system. Any thoughts on that?
I'm almost moved to tears. I mean, I just want to pause. I'll answer my response to that in a minute. I would like to point out that that kind of question and the way you phrase it reflects a state of being that is being called forth as we stand on this threshold of not knowing what's going on. That state of being that your words came from, that openness, the vulnerability, the willingness to look at what seems obvious and question it, because that state of being knows that there's a higher order of beingness than simply doing what we've been doing. And here's where I get moved. The higher order, we know that there is I'll call it grace. The thing that moves us to be moved by art or moved by God, the notion of God, or religious ritual or ceremony. The thing that moves us when we think about a child being born, it's beyond, it is beyond I don't even have words for it. So that's why I mean art. See, art is the thing that allows expression of what we don't have words for, because this thing called the brain or the mind does not have the kind of capacity to experience some deep truths that we know, that we experience through our bodies, for example, or through, in your work, all the different intelligences that you work with. This is only one of them. And this one does not have words for the numinous. The numinous being, it's a great word. For me, every time I think of it, I see light. I don't have a word for what it means. But I want to come back to your book. The other reason why, when I saw it, I read it, and I sent you a photo of me reading it on the train, on the A train in New York. I said, Rose is on the A train. The point is that this book is so relevant to the most urbane issues that we're dealing with, because art is our elevation, is our fuel beyond this mere physical existence. This struggle that we seem to have with yes and no, right and wrong, black and white, right and left. Art is the grace through it to a higher order of being with each other. And this book, I told you this, when I read it very slowly, because between the words, there is this energy, and it is the state of being from which you wrote it. I think that the energy that's magic in this book, that people will call art, is actually the state of being that gave birth to this book. And it's a state of being one with the best we can be, one with the highest expression of agency as a human.
And that is what your work is all about. And that's where, you know, we had many conversations, obviously, in the last couple of months, where I moved to tears because that bringing your work into the garden of Rose, we are bringing in, I'm saying we because that's the way I feel, that soul aspect that is beyond any how shall I say, it's beyond any definition of any religious frame, or beyond even even the words, where silence can be appreciated. That's where I feel every day a little stronger that your process has a space in there, because it plays on individual level and it plays on collective level. And you are a bridge in that. You can bring that bridge from one, let's call it the world that is at the moment struggling, to a world that is emerging, not might emerge, is emerging. And you are that bridge with all that you've lived and all your life experience, work experience, everything you are. And I feel, and that's how I created Rose as well, is I feel that women of a certain age, with a certain experience, with a certain background, but also, generally speaking, elder people, have a space in that conversation. And that's why I'm so happy you are here, Elsie, that we are having this conversation and that we are in that space where co-creation, as you were saying, on all levels, has its own dynamic, but also its own value. So the co-creation that we are facilitating as well is in that logic, if there is a logic, to a soul. It sounds like a contradiction, but it feels very strongly to me. I was very emotional just now. That you bring the soul branding into the garden. And it's important to have a roadmap in how to bring it to people that are not having that are looking for ways of expressing that is not in the old way, but in a more appropriate way of how they want to live their spirit and their lives. And from what I understand from some of the readers, is that's the movement that comes out of Rose, but that needs to also be held in the garden, in what you facilitate, for instance, in the soul branding process. So we are coming a little bit to an end of this conversation, and I'm really, really happy that we are holding this together. Is there anything that you would like to add? Anything that you would like to say about your work or our work together? Anything you would like to bring forth?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me into the garden. And I'd also like to say that I am encouraged, because I agree with you that underneath the apparent, I'm going to call it vice, like it's happening now,
Yes.
which is temporary. I don't know how long it'll last, but it's temporary. Underneath, there is like fabulous stuff happening.
Yes.
And it's happening with my next gen mentees. It's happening at a movement level. There are several movements coming together, and I am playing in them. And I have this beautiful opportunity to see actually what is happening and growing under the surface. And it is growing very deep. It's coming from very deep places. It's coming from the beingness of this next gen. They're
Absolutely.
doing it not to get ahead. They're not doing it for egoic reasons or out of desperation. It's from their beingness. And that's very encouraging. And also, I am privileged to be working with senior leaders who have some distance and are now, the board at the board level, for example, of significant opportunity to influence. And they too are at a place of a threshold. So I'm very encouraged. I have faith and I know that the greatness of humanity is at work and is growing stronger and stronger. And I feel like my job is to show it how to implement itself in the 3D, because we need that.
Absolutely.
And I just want to repeat, feeling good, giving ourselves emotional hygiene every day by meditating, that's great. And it's not enough. That this is the time to be building and acting. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to our collaboration, particularly on one of the ninth, the Women's Threshold Retreat number 9 of Humanity, Inc., which is centered on Rose.
Thank you so much, Elsie. Indeed, it is all about this new generation. And what you've just said brings me to another space, which is really about what I feel is that there's a lot of willingness and a lot of humility within the younger generation that you are mentoring. There's humility there, and they know that they will make the difference. And I feel that with every single generation within the younger generation, it's coming stronger. And they are already the solution, otherwise they wouldn't be here. So I'm very curious to see what will develop in the next couple of years. And feel very privileged that we are going to witness that together as well. Thank you so much, Elsie. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Same here, Cécile. Thank you.